Hello, Simone. Today we are going to be talking about just how cooked France is. Just for some statistics that people might be surprised about is in France, your average pensioner makes more money in terms of like cost of living adjusted money than your average worker in the country. In France, 57% of people are net beneficiaries of the government. 43% pay into the government. France
Oh,
is
no.
already past the point, and I said this is a point where democracies begin to break down, where the average citizen is being paid by the government to exist. And we're going to look at where this has led to downstream collapse. Just a second here. Also, very fun. What I love about diving into France, and we've had episodes diving into the UK and diving into Germany, and now we're diving into France, is each country is completely cooked in like its own way. It's almost like Europe got to be like the Captain Planet of evil and country vices. And, the UK is like, I'll arrest people for memes. Like there was the guy who was arrested in Scotland for literally painting Islam can be questioned on his wall. And then the police were like, no, it cannot. The girl who well, we're not going to go into all of that. You can go to our video where we point out that the only reason a country would ban the flying of its own flag is if it was under occupation. There's no other reason to ban the flying of your own country's flag, because presumably you do that in support of your government, right? If the government sees that as an attack on them, and this usually happens under occupation, like France under occupation, you ban it. So the UK's got its draconian speech laws and all of that. Then in Germany, you have like a secret police force of like brown shorts that literally label mainstream political parties as terrorist organizations and monitor and harass mainstream like people who are to the left of like the United States president or us, for example, as being political. Mind you, this is a political party, the AFD, that is run by a lesbian in an interracial relationship. So, yeah, not exactly that extreme, right? Then we get to France, right? And what is their nature of terribleness? They're actually pretty good about not arresting people for stupid things. And they're actually pretty good about not like spying on the quote unquote far right party, which we'll go into, like Le Pen's party, or bullying them. But they have the curse of the French, which
Oh,
means
no.
the problem with France is that it's full of French people. And French people have completely unrealistic expectations around what to expect. And they are treating like if you watch, and what we'll go into a bit is this recent charade of France's current prime minister Macron constantly trying to get the retirement age raised from 62 to 64. Now 64 would be a very young retirement age globally speaking, and
Yep. Let's see, is it in the USA? It is 67 for Social Security.
Yeah. So the point being is he wants to raise it a moderate amount. And we'll go into the data here, but like anyone could tell you that the system's going to be insolvent in just like a decade and a half if they don't raise it. And literally, this is what keeps breaking the government. And when I say break, I mean literally, they've been through like 4 sitting whatevers, like head of the governments in like the past few years, because they keep having to like step down.
Prime ministers, right? Yeah,
Whatever.
because France is a president and a prime minister, and they're churning through prime ministers.
Yeah, we'll get to it. Yeah, and the core reason that everything about Macron's blew up, even though he tried to side with the lefties, is just over this retirement age thing. And what makes this so funny to me is the system won't even exist in like a decade and a half if they don't make this change, right? And this change,
I feel like even if they do, 2 years doesn't seem like nearly enough.
Is estimated to increase its lifespan by 1 decade, maybe, if they do it immediately. And so they're not even like arguing for like this being a permanent thing. They are arguing for a thing they would hypothetically want if money grew on trees. But like you go to the French people and you're like, here is the data. Money doesn't grow on trees. And they're like, whatever. So let's get into this. So right now in France, retirees per workers. So we're not even talking about dependents. Remember, I talked about they're already past the dependency ratio with 57% of the population taking its money from the state, not giving to the state.
Yeah.
43% of French is already retirees.
Gosh.
That's going to be 55% by 2070. And keep in mind, their birth rate fell 20% in the past 10 years.
So yeah, this is only going to get worse. Are there many developed countries that have that proportion of old people, or is
Yeah,
France
France is
leading?
actually one of the best countries in Europe for demographics. They
Oh,
have one of the highest fertility rates in all of the
fertility
developed
rates,
world.
yeah, but still, proportion of old people. I mean, like I thought most countries hadn't gotten to that point of being
Most
past
countries
that
don't
dependency ratio.
most countries don't have a retirement age at 62.
Yeah, that is really young.
Mhm.
Okay.
So France actually has, like, if you're talking like fertility rates wise, France is great. And if you want to know why France is great, despite being a Catholic country, because that's unusual for Catholic countries, is it actually secularized way earlier than other countries in Europe. And as we have pointed out, collapsing fertility rates is largely about the urban monocultural belief system. And the longer you have been exposed to that, the more resistance you've been able to culturally and perhaps even genetically evolve to its lures. And France has about 100 years on most other European countries because they underwent their first fertility collapse about 100 years before, for example, the UK did, which is why France, I would argue, has such robust fertility numbers in its native population. But it doesn't matter because they're completely unreasonable. I should note here, by the way, and people can ask, if I'm speaking derisively about French people know, like, one of the jokes on the show is like, I don't like really like French people very much, like the country very much. I make jokes on that, and people are like, why do you feel this way? Have you been to France, Simone? You've been
Multiple
traveling there?
times. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I've been there multiple times too. And I have never been to anywhere on earth, and I'm not even talking about by like a margin. Like nowhere comes close to being treated with as much rudeness and derision as I was treated for no reason. And people can be like, well, it's a cultural difference. And I'm like, fine, then I don't like that culture, right? Like, and people in Europe, they talk about this. Like, I know French people when they come to the US and they're like, everyone is so nice and inauthentic. And I'm like, no, that's not inauthentic. You don't have to like somebody to treat them with basic human dignity, right? Like you don't need to, like, if you're doing your job and they're not like actively resisting you, right? It doesn't cost you anything to smile and try to make the day of like a random other person who you don't know anything about marginally better. And did you have this experience in France as well, or is this unique to me?
I can't say I interacted a lot with people because I generally avoid people, whether I'm
Mm,
traveling or not.
yeah.
So I guess I don't really care. And if they leave me alone, I'm pretty happy about it.
Yeah. Also, it was a constant. I mean, this is not unique to France. It also happened when I'm traveling in Italy, but the constant harassment of young women walking around is also really gets to me. But again, this is just where I'm culturally different, right? And people can be like, well, different cultures be different, right? And that's true around the world. And I'm just like, from my cultural perspective, I think that you should give other people that you meet randomly the benefit of the doubt and be nice to them. And people will be like, well, that's just Paris or whatever, right? And it's like, okay, great. Maybe it is just Paris, but like we go to Manhattan all the time, and people in Manhattan are perfectly nice to strangers. Like, and
I
Manhattan
don't
is even
know.
no, well, Manhattan's known as being one of the less nice places in the United States, and it's still fairly nice. The only city I go to in the US where I like regularly see people be mean to people out of nowhere is San Francisco, but that's mostly because they're on like drugs or clearly mentally ill. And that's more just like random attack homeless, I'll call them. The attack homeless that San Francisco has cultivated and pushed into its most dense tourist zones. But anyway, so to continue here, deficits are already emerging post 2023 reform. COR estimates 1.7 billion deficit by 2025, potentially rising to 6.6 billion by 2030. Even with the retirement age hike, pension spending holds at around 13.7% of GDP until 2030, but could climb if growth slows. September 2025 Financial Times reports based on Luxembourg income study data highlighted that retirees over 65 now have a higher standard of living and disposable income relative to working age adults. However, this isn't because raw pensions exceed full-time salaries. So let's talk over a bit how this works.
Yeah, I'm curious.
So they have a median standard of living when you cost adjust of 2,310 euros a month per household versus for workers 2,110. So slightly higher. Now, the reason
2010 versus 2010. Did you get those numbers
no,
right? They're the same.
2.3 thousand versus 2.1 thousand.
Oh, okay. So basically a 200 euro difference per
Yeah,
month.
but the reason for this is they have fewer dependents. They have lower taxes because people
Yeah,
on
that
pensions
makes
have
sense.
lower taxes.
Yeah.
But they often have supplementary income from like assets they've built up over their house, like houses or whatever. But still, that's absolutely wild.
It is.
In terms of like what France is paying on immigrants, France actually has a significantly better immigrant situation than most of Europe. I think, despite most people's perception, I think it's
Maybe they just concentrate in Paris, because I see a ton of YouTube videos on just
yeah.
Paris being completely different now than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
Well, Trump even said this. Right? He got in trouble for saying it, but he goes, "Oh, Paris is like a dirt place to live now. Nobody wants to be there anymore."
Oh no.
And this is a situation we're having all around the world. I'll note, like Manhattan, for example, is a garbage city today compared to 15 years ago.
It is not the same.
Even 5-6 years ago, it's not the same. And it's just empty and boarded up. And you see this, it's not just France. There's many places in the UK you can go through where, it's clear that you are not welcome there based on your ethnicity. And it's a very uncomfortable thing, especially if those neighborhoods were important to you growing up, or you saw and they were important to you at some point in your life. But the funny thing is like all of my best French friends, because I actually have like a collection of like French friends I'm pretty tight with, are immigrants.
You mean they are immigrants to France?
Yeah, they're African immigrants to France. Like when I go to France, I stayed at their house, and this is all Black family, all wider Black community, and that's where I was hanging out, and they were all way nicer to me than any of the French people I've met. So like this is my thing where I might have a bit more ambivalence than other countries to what is happening in France right now. But France actually doesn't have as bad of an immigrant situation as either in terms of how they influence policies, as you see it in the UK, or in terms to just their sheer percentage of the population, as you have in Germany. But their immigrant situation is bad in another way, which is that immigrants in France are a net tax drain, unlike a lot of other countries. Like in the United States, the immigrants are generally argued to be a net tax benefit.
Yeah.
But in France, so this is from Le Figaro. Nicolas Parevo-Monti concludes that immigration represents a GDP loss in France of 3.4% per year. Keep in mind, they're only spending 0.4% on retirees.
Wow.
So if immigrants had the same employment rate as natives, the national wealth generated each year would be 3.4% higher, and tax revenues would be 1.5 percentage points higher as well. He says, quote, "This loss in gross and this cost to the taxpayer contribute to high tax burdens on businesses, which in turn hampers the entire economy." In other words, encouraging immigration to fill shortages in the few strained sectors amounts to sacrificing growth in all of our sectors. So France, again, even though it's got like the fertility rate problem, it's very bad at setting up a system that selects for productive immigrant populations. And if they could, then immigrant, and this is the thing, like immigrants, like it's not a like falling fertility rates and falling demographics is not a warm body problem. It's a taxpayer problem. If you are taking people into your country who are tax drains, that's going to hurt your country.
And again, people, they like to frame that as, oh, these pronatalists only want certain types of people to reproduce. That is such a terrible misrepresentation when what we're talking about is the ability to maintain social services for society's most vulnerable people. When you are bringing in non-net tax-paying immigrants or any citizen that is not a net taxpayer, you are actively throwing the vulnerable people already in that country under the bus. You're saying, I don't care about them anymore. Let's accelerate their demise.
Welfare explodes. Who cares? This is, and I will note my wider stance on immigration. And I think it's something So I have a few points here. I think immigration in Europe is very different than immigration in the United States. The United States is dealing with a majority Latin American immigrant population, which is culturally not that dissimilar from the native population. In fact, every single one of the vices that people associate with the Latin American immigrant wave that the United States is dealing with right now are vices that we complained about in equal amounts during past Catholic majority immigrant waves. When the Irish came, you had the Irish mob, you had all the terrible crime waves and everything like that. When the Italians came, you had the Italian mafia. This is just a Catholic immigrant wave thing. We have different episodes on why you see organized crime in Catholic populations more. It was specifically Catholic immigrant populations more, because it's not unique to Catholic. You also see it in Eastern Orthodox communities, which you have the Russian mob as well, where you don't see them importing their criminal organizations very effectively if they're from other cultural groups. Like, for example, like the Japanese and Chinese had big organized crime waves within their country, but they didn't import them in the degree to which like MS-16 or the mafia or the mob.
Yeah, I've not heard of these being United States.
Yeah, so the wider point I was making here is that the United States can more easily adapt and integrate its immigrant population. I mean, as we saw, over 50% of Hispanic males voted for Trump, right? Like, they're adapting pretty quickly. But and I think that we have less of a moral argument against immigration than other countries, given that, we all did come here at some point, right? To a country that was dissimilar from us cultural history. Like, it is a nation of immigrants.
I do love, though, you kind of get the tone that, I mean, theming with France and their immigrants, and apparently them bringing in net drains and the Statue of Liberty's slogan of like, bring me your tired, your masses. In China, France giving us that statue and being like, send the trash over.
Send the trash over here.
Yeah. Go to America, guys. But then they keep bringing in their own.
Right, but
such a passive aggressive thing. I don't know. I find it very strange.
I think that they have less of a, it's literally like their native land and country, right? Like, if a group wants to say, I'm uncomfortable with letting unchecked immigration into my native lands, that I think should be treated very differently. And to me, isn't
for the United States, but yeah, literally, you have indigenous peoples in France.
The French are the indigenous people.
The indigenous people, yeah.
and I'd point out, in America, like, the waves of immigrants weren't awesome for the indigenous population.
No, they weren't. Yeah.
Not a lot we can do to reverse the situation right now. But the point I'm making is, and you could be like, well, you could give reparations. And it's like, actually, that would only make things worse. In the indigenous communities in the US, where they do have really high amounts that come from like casinos and stuff like this, and we'll do a separate episode on this, you have like really high rates of like drug addiction and lack of education and poverty, just in part because of this. Look at any of our episodes on UBI. Like, giving out reparations seriously disadvantages the populations that receive the reparations intergenerationally. That's a whole other thing. The point being is I will say that France does, though, and they'll say like, well, we take immigrants because they're from countries that we previously colonized often, right? Like, and maybe I understand like the logic there, but to me, it's not like that's true. They still have the right to say, I want to.
Sort of. I don't know. Because isn't it the case that with English colonialism, the countries did really well? French colonialism, they didn't. So France.
No, the French were garbage colonialists.
I know. So they kind of owe them. They kind of owe them if they screwed up their country.
Yeah, like the British really don't have that much to be embarrassed about colonialism.
They can be like, no, man, like, you're welcome. We made you better off. The French.
And people can be like, oh, well, what about these atrocities? And it's like, even if you account for the atrocities, the England spent like half a century paying for a giant fleet just to stop other countries from doing slavery, right? Like, nobody had done that sort of international moral policing at that point. That was like a completely new idea. Like, let's take a portion of our national budget and just police everyone else's slaving routes, right? Like, Britain really has nothing to be embarrassed about in regards to that stuff. But anyway, I should continue here. So, recent analysis, including adaptations of fiscal space concepts, indicate that without further reforms, the system's funding from labor taxes could hit limits where sustainable taxation can't cover expenses. We're talking here about the Social Security system. Pre-2023 baseline projections suggested exhaustion by 2030. So their pension system in France exhausts in
5 years.
5 years.
Okay.
They've got 5 fucking years.
And that's so interesting to me because when, for example, it was proposed that retirement age would be raised, forefront among the protesters were young people who were like,
No, you got this wrong.
really?
I looked this up. Yeah. So the yellow shirt riots were yellow vest riots were not about this issue
I'm
specifically.
referring to more recent protests, the
Well,
ones
so
that
the
have just
reason
happened.
why that they've been able to get the protesters out there, even the young ones who
Mhm.
no way by the math are going to see these
That's
pensions,
why I find it so strange.
is that the young people are being manipulated by the unions, which have a lot of members who are pensioners. So basically,
Oh,
French has like
they're
really
kind of being
strong.
lied to. Like they may not even be aware of the fact
They're
that
being
they're definitely
explicitly
not.
lied to. So
Okay.
I was actually looking at this, and they went through and they would like ask the protesters why they were protesting. And it was things like, well, why should I have to work when the environment's burning and stuff, like typical leftist slop. It really, they don't understand why they're protesting. They just hate Macron and they hate quote unquote business, where Macron isn't even like pro business. He's pro like basic rationality. And I don't even think he's a good guy. He's not like my guy. Like I'm a Le Pen guy, right? Like, but Macron's things that he's fighting for are like basic things to keep the pension system working for 15 years rather than 5 years, right? Like
Yeah.
this is basic stuff, right? What are other things that he's fought for that are like really, just absolute nanners that you people are arguing for? Like, I want an infinite money tree. Well, I'm sorry, we don't have an infinite money tree. Well, then I'm gonna burn down your car and city and murder people in the streets. Maybe don't do that, right? Like, anyway. So at that stage, we're talking the 2040 stage, pension deficits could escalate significantly. Current pension deficits are modest 1.7 billion euros in 2025, but they could rise by 2030 to 6.6 billion, contributing to overall. And keep in mind, a debt that is always increasing is not a debt that is serviceable and will eventually be called on, right? And there really isn't much you can do about this. The other thing that he wanted to do that everybody complained about, where they go, it's big business, when really it's just practical, is the insane tax, like wealth taxes that they tried to do in France. That would have basically kept people from investing. And
was this recent? Because the last time I remember reading about France and taxes was that France was just slurping up all of the
because
wealthy British people when the UK raised taxes.
Macron's reforms.
Oh.
And everybody freaked out about that, when really he was significantly helping the French people. They were just too spoiled to see it. So, by the way, for the first time in 2024, deaths outpace births in France. So they've already hit like the beginning of the plateau, and now is wee down. All they've been the tick going up the roller coaster before they hit back down. So what was I going to say here? Oh, yeah, I was going to talk about the unemployment gap among immigrants in France.
Oh.
Non-EU foreigners face 19.5% unemployment versus 8% for natives in France.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah. Poverty rates are 34% in immigrant populations compared to 14% within the native population.
So is this due to some form of employment discrimination whereby it's really hard to get a job as an immigrant? Because that is the case in many countries.
I don't think so. So I pointed this out a lot, and this is like a mantra that everyone needs to like globally, we need to grok this. And I love it. It came from my grandfather, who was a congressman, actually. And I only read it because somebody read it back to me with a slur that he had used while explaining it. And I was like, wow, Granddad, I had never considered that. Thank you for this gift of knowledge from a different age. But he said famously that you cannot have generous social welfare systems and porous borders. He said you have to choose one of the two, because if you have generous social welfare systems and porous borders, like very, very easy to cross borders, you are going to just draw the people who want to live off of those systems into your country until, like osmosis, you get equalization and you no longer have those systems functional anymore. They've been completely milked to saturation point. That's why I use the osmosis. Sorry, do people know what osmosis is? Should I explain what osmosis is? It doesn't even matter. Anyway, do you know? Do you need a?
I know it's about equalization between cell membranes, typically.
Okay, great. Yeah, with concentrations of materials to live.
Yeah.
So anyway, so The point here being, because if you do, then you get equalization. The two ways around that is to have generous social welfare systems, but then keep your borders very tight, or you can. But France tried to have both, and what that means is because France is more generous to its immigrants than other countries, like the United States. If I am an African, right? And I'm deciding, do I want to go immigrate to the United States or do I want to go immigrate to France, right? I'm making this choice. Suppose I'm one of two people, right? In case one, I have a Harvard graduate degree or a Stanford graduate degree. I'm a well-known engineer. I'm really like productive. Obviously, like the choice wouldn't even be you go to the US. So you got Nigerian guy, super, super smart, could get a job at any company. There is no way on earth he'd immigrate to France unless he just happened to speak like French and have a family connection there or something, right?
Probably,
But
yeah.
generally speaking, outside of other factors, he's going to go to the United States. Now, suppose I am a refugee or I am, somebody who, is comfortable living off of state welfare systems. Which country do I go to? Oh my God, no, I would not look or touch the United States with a 10-foot pole. I'd be, especially with Trump and knowing the sentiment about immigrants now in the United States, I would just be like, F that. No, but the funny thing is in the United States, there isn't particularly bad treatment of like high talent immigrants, especially in anywhere where they would immigrate to. The United States is being sane in how they're handling this. So the reason why France deals with immigrants who are a drain on state resources is in part because of their generous social services. And I will note that the United States has broken this in its history recently with the Biden administration, where you saw many of these immigrant towns where immigrants were getting like literally more money from the government than welfare recipients, like native welfare recipients, on like credit cards and getting nice hotels and stuff like this. This was happening in the UK as well. And really messed up because then that draws the types of immigrants that cause problems. And it's often the immigrants in these sorts of setups where you have the problems of, the crime waves and the rapes and the assaults and all of that, and I think that this is one of those things that the left can't really deal with. Like there was a case recently where somebody living in one of those nice hotels and getting money every week in the UK, some girl, and people were like, but he had a place to live and he had all the money he needed. And why did like we the left acts, I'm not the left, acts like the reason why immigrant populations sometimes do bad things is simply because of bad economic conditions or lack of material goods or something like that, not because they have set up a system that would actively draw in the type of grifters who's comfortable living that life when most people just aren't. And in fact, you often see this even in countries that offer these things. Like I know this about Asian immigrants I know from who grew up in Canada, and they were like, "Oh yeah, my parents could have taken from those government systems, but they actively chose not to because they thought it was dishonorable." And like that's the type of immigrant you want, right? Like where they're like, well, I could live off the government. I fit all the qualifications to, but like I'm a guest here and I have to earn my place in society. And those are the types of people who are going to be really anti-immigration in the next wave, right? There were a bunch of anti-immigrant riots in Australia recently, and I noticed a bunch of the people rioting looked like visibly Asian. And I was like, oh, you see? Well, you see this in the United States as well. A lot of the anti-immigrant protests have a lot of Black and Hispanic participants. But what was it that Macron put into place that caused everyone to turn against him and led to this incredibly, because he was like the king for a bit and then his coalition completely sped up and then he had to cheat to beat the right. Oh, so for people who don't know, this is why he had to end up cheating to beat the right. So what he did is he teamed up with the far left groups, and he's sort of a more centrist party. And he's like, we won't run against each other in the districts where we're running against Le Pen's party, just to ensure, because she was going to get the plurality and be able to control the government and likely right the ship. We're going to talk a bit about her party's politics in just a second. If people tell you they're far right, you can judge whether you'd support them. All right. But what he tried to do was a retirement age increase of 62 to 64. He and people just freaked the F out basically. And that really gets me, right? Like it really gets me that what he was attempting to do was keep a system solvent for more than 5 years. That they were rioting over an imaginary thing. It it reminds me of that Monty Python scene where the guy wants to be a woman and the other guy is like, sure, fine.
I want to have babies. You want to have babies? It's every man's right to have babies if he wants them. But you can't have babies. Don't you oppress me. It is symbolic of our struggle against oppression. Symbolic of his struggle against reality.
And I feel like that's what's happening in France. They just want to protest. So when asked, by the way, if you were wondering why the Yellow Vest protesters, like young people, were protesting, they said it symbolized deeper frustrations with Macron's pro-business, read that, pro-reality policies, which they saw as favoring the wealthy while eroding social protections. Issues like precarious job markets, e.g. gig economy, short-term contracts, high youth unemployment, around 17 to 20% for under 25, and education reforms fueled a sense of general discontent. Okay, and getting rid of the wealth tax, that's going to make all of those things worse. Sorry, adding the wealth tax, him getting rid of it helped all of those things. It caused a flood of new taxpayers, business starters, everything like that. And then other things that they said, they had a chant, which was, why work longer on a dying planet? Which is sort of crazy, right? All right, but I want to talk a bit about Le Pen's party.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've heard that they're far-right extremists, right? What are their far-right and insane beliefs, right?
Lay it on me.
They are against birthright citizenship. That means that somebody automatically becomes a citizen because they're born in a country. In a country that has an indigenous population like France, that makes perfect sense to me. In the United States, I might question ending that slightly more, but in France, I have no problem with getting rid of that. That's totally a rational thing, especially if there's people abusing the system to abuse your generosity as French people. I mean, if immigrants are a net drain on your economy, what that means is they are essentially like a guest that you are giving money to, rolling out the red carpet for, and if they then treat your country with anything other than the utmost respect and your heritage with anything other than the utmost respect. And I doubt even many people in Le Pen's party would want to kick out immigrants that are treating French culture with respect. And we'll see this as well, right? Like this is more to prevent people from abusing the system who do not really care or like French customs and ways of life. Ban dual citizenship and strip nationality from foreign criminals. That sounds pretty reasonable to me.
Yeah.
National preference for jobs, housing, and welfare. Reserve social benefits, e.g. family allowances, RSA, and minimum incomes to be exclusively for French citizens. Non-French must work in France for 5 years to receive them.
That seems
Why is that not already the law? How is this the far-right party?
Yeah.
Moratorium on immigration and deportations. Immediate halt to immigration, end family reunification, regroupment familia, no regulation for undocumented immigrants, and deport illegal immigrants. No, deport illegal immigrants. Asylum applications must be filed at embassies abroad, not in France. All of that is perfectly reasonable. Restrict healthcare for foreigners. Again, perfectly reasonable. And de-Islamization measures, specifically a ban on veils in public spaces, which, is something that I ideologically am like, I have more trouble with.
Yeah, that impinges on people's cultural sovereignty.
But the French people have a right to their own cultural sovereignty. And there are many places in Muslim majority countries. This is what I would say. If these populations were the majority, the populations where people are wearing veils right now, would you French people, women, be allowed to go outside without veils on? Likely not. In most countries where they're the majorities, that's a law. Or you face it where it's not a law, you face the risk of violence and rape when you do go out without it. So why is it unjust for them to ask that of these other people? I think that it's their right as a sovereign country to demand that of people who are their guests.
You make a fair point. Yeah, I could see that.
I would feel differently if there was no other country that these women could live in where that was the norm or allowed, or in many cases legally mandated. Right? So yeah, I can't understand why they literally are like, how dare you force this on these people? And it's like, there are countries where people who think like them are the majority, and we can look at the laws in those countries. The famous Dune line that everyone likes to quote. When I am weaker than you, I ask for freedom, because that is according to your principles. When I am stronger than you, I take away your freedom, because that is according to my principles. Basically saying that the groups only say, oh, I want this stuff right now because they can benefit from it, right? Exit key EU framework. So they want to leave NATO, they want to leave the EU.
Wow.
They're claiming that France is overpays by $7 billion annually. They want to hold a public vote on leaving the EU. I think that's totally
Wow.
rational. The EU has been a complete disaster, and it's going to be quite dangerous to France in the near future, because France, for a long time, was a net drain on the EU. Basically, Germany paid into it, France took out of it. That was the way it mostly worked. It was basically a form of war reparations on Germany. But now that Germany's population is crashing out faster than France's is, France has no reason to continue to play with this basically scam system they set up to drain German coffers so that Germany could play like it was ruling Europe, which I guess they kind of were for a period. Yay, they got what they wanted. Imposed their totalitarian mindset on everyone. They want more protectionist trade and nationalization of, specifically, they want nationalization of a lot of public utilities. It's sort of like their version of like the BBC, NPR, that sort of stuff. Totally reasonable. They want an anti-fraud ministry. Ooh, a lot of French people are going to be mad about that. They want tax incentives for youth and family to try to get the birth rate up. And
not going to make a difference, but well, I guess if it's income tax incentives, it really could, actually. That's the one thing we really support.
They want to stop giving like family allowances and welfare to families that are committing crimes or in other ways delinquent and like doing bad things, which again, great. They even want to enact the death penalty. Oh no, I'm pro death penalty if you do it cheaply. In the US, we do it too expensively.
That's the thing. Yeah, I don't know if they would be doing it financially sustainably.
I think most people, when they initially set it up, would do it sustainably. I think the only reason the US is so unsustainable about it is because we've had it in for so long. But they want to ban, this is the only policy I really hate about theirs, is they want to ban assisted unaliving, which I think is not smart.
It's so off theme for every
Well, no, it's like
problem.
to appeal to the traditional Catholics.
Okay.
Keep in mind, they also have like ridiculous IVF policies in France where it's basically illegal.
Yeah.
And people are like, no, it's not illegal. It's that you have to implant the embryos immediately. That makes it functionally like really difficult to do at above replacement rate, which to me means that you're functionally sterilizing any family that's having trouble.
Basically.
Just for some roll into of how bad the situation in France is right now. France has been in a prolonged political crisis since President Emmanuel Macron called snap legislative elections in 2024 following his centrist alliance's poor showing in European parliamentary elections. The elections resulted in a hung National Assembly with no single bloc securing the majority. Blah, blah, blah. Le Pen's party would have won the plurality with about 33%, so they cheated to win. I could go over the specifics of what's been going on there, but I don't think it's particularly interested.
I think the LDR is they're basically unable to form a functional government right now. One of the primary reasons why a coalition can't be formed that would be sufficient to do so is that none of the politicians, given the time left before the next scheduled election, want to put their reputations on the line and get involved with this dumpster fire when it would probably preclude them from being able to win when they run next. So they're like, no, I'm sitting this one out, totally not tying myself to this mess. I'm 2 years away from your next big election, not touching this. So basically no one's stepping up to the plate because they actually want to get reelected. And the system demands a certain amount of consensus in order to function. And so you have this deeply divided government that has no incentive to form or be functional, which means really, this is just another example. I mean, we're recording this at the time of a government shutdown in the United States. What we're starting to see is an age of dysfunctional governments, of governments unable to even spend the money they still have at this time. And I think people are going to be increasingly accustomed, if not functionally, at least mimetically, to the idea of their governments not really working anymore, and recontextualizing their private communities, their own families, and also just private businesses as being the new sources of ultimate governing power.
Yeah, and I point out here with France's IVF policy, we wouldn't have any kids if we lived in France. Like we like literally would be sterilized by the state.
Or we'd have to go to other countries, and that's what most people are doing in Europe.
Well,
they're going to Greece, they're going to the Netherlands, they're going to Mexico, they're going.
It's very hard. It's very hard to do.
It's expensive. It's
especially
not
if you're doing it for a lot of kids, like we would be.
Yeah.
So, and you got to go for the checkup appointments. You got to go. So in France today, like I'm just pointing out my larger theming here. In France today, we would be sterilized by the state. Under Sharia law, we wouldn't. All of my like best French friends are Black Muslims. So like and like literal African Black Muslims. Those are all my best friends and friends. And so like my ambivalence towards France's situation right now is high because they've always been nicer to me. Like the African Muslim community in France has always been nicer to me than the French community. Now, this isn't, by the way, true of all Muslim populations. Like in the UK, for example, the Muslim population there has always been ruder to me than the native British population. But they're getting Muslims from different parts of the world. I don't know what the wider, like obviously I have disproportionately spent time in one Muslim community in France. And I don't know if this is true for all the Muslim communities in France.
And for what it's worth, I had good friends who were college students in France when I was in college and visited France a ton and had a great experience. So it's, I don't know. I also feel like part of this is your Texan heritage. And there's something also that seems to be uniquely Texan about not liking France and mispronouncing.
Yeah, everyone I knew grew up hated French people. Like
Yeah.
it was like a normal thing. Like you guys might not understand this if you're from Texas, but it was seen as like a normal patriotic thing. Like it was part of being patriotic. Like
Yeah.
guns.
Whereas my grandmother was a French war bride. My mother
She was not a French war bride, Simone.
She called literally her biography is called Memoirs of a French War Bride. She really wanted to be French.
Because she thought it was high class. Okay,
Yeah.
She was a effing Jew from Russia. Okay, she was not a French war bride.
She tried to brand herself as such. Okay, like quite literally. But anyway,
I know
like
she did because she was hiding from Nazis.
Yeah, but I mean, I grew up with Francophiles, so I'm okay with it. If you're French and you watch this podcast, please don't think we all hate
No,
you.
we haven't. We've done some. There's this great community in France, which I wish we had in the U.S., which is like an investment group.
That one, yes.
Yeah, that specifically is trying to. They're like a VC, but they're like aligned with like the Le Pen party and like trying to bring France's birth rates back up, bring back heritage in ways that they can also capitalize on.
You also have to keep in mind, French culture is extremely divided. Parisian culture is extremely different from the culture in the French countryside, for example.
Yes, I always hear that, right? And so maybe if I spent more time in the French countryside, I'd have and I haven't been to the French countryside.
Actually, I think people in the French countryside also have like a similar attitude toward Parisians that you do. They kind of hate them.
Get rid of them.
Yeah, so, I'm just saying.
Well, no, it's one of those things where like there's just no reason to be rude to somebody for no reason. Like
unless you're a Parisian.
It makes
I feel like the snobbiness is part of the cultural cachet, to be the mean, popular, fashionable girl. That coldness, just how the studies have found that waitresses that are more cold get higher tips.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. That seems very unfair.
I know. It really frustrates. Like all the waitresses who participated in these studies were like completely outraged by this. Like, I bent over backwards to be accommodating and nice to you, and you tip me less. So yeah.
Anyway,
you want the approval of the person who's like aloof and.
I just don't understand the purpose of acting that way. Like it puts other people in a bad mood and then they act bad towards other people. And it's like a cycle that spins out of control.
Yeah.
I just don't, I understand it's their culture. And like, if they're leaning into it, Parisian culture specifically, I note that it's not that way in the countryside, I've heard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will also say like in German cities, I've gotten much more like glares and brusque responses in German cities, like checking out at the grocery line and stuff. Like fumbling with money and whatnot, and them just being like, and Germans are known for that. And I love Germans, just because people are.
Germans are fine. They're too authoritarian. Like
no, their language is the cutest language. How can you call a language that has words like Wasserfall?
Well, I should point out, by the way, I have also dated both French and German girls. Very seriously dated a German girl. She was a hardcore communist. She argued to me that Cuba was a better place to live than America. And I was like, why are people risking their lives in little dinghies to try to get to America then? Nobody does that going in the other direction. I don't
know. Yeah, Greta's risking her life in a little dinghy to try to get to Gaza, so you never know. People
that whole thing's over now. Like, I'm wondering, like, for everyone on the flotilla, they like look around and they're like, okay, so this is no longer an efficient way to get aid to Gaza.
No,
like,
it's just a party boat,
What do
Anyway,
we do? I actually genuinely wonder if they did party afterwards, or were they too shocked by it being Trump to actually party?
the boats looked like group houses in Silicon Valley, like the interiors of them from the photos I saw. I just feel like it's a bunch of young people hanging out mostly, going on an adventure like your dad did in his college days. But yeah, no, France is, man, I mean, just like considering the timelines of this, you know, that this is going to become an installment program in 5 years, we are very close to seeing the world teetering on very profound instability. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, especially as AI rises. So buckle up, friends.
Yeah, buckle the F up. Oh, by the way, people are wondering, they're like, Malcolm, why have you dated people from all of these different countries? My undergrad, where I went for 4 years to get my graduate degree, was St. Andrews in Scotland, which, being in Europe and being one of the best schools in Europe, has a hugely diverse population in terms of like what countries and what nationalities, which is why I have so many friends from different countries around Europe.
Elite UK schools are extremely international because they get demand from foreign students and they love accepting them because they pay much, much higher tuition. So foreign students are able to supplement the tuition of the local ones. And so it's a lot harder for local students to get in, but there's a lot of foreign students there.
Yeah. Anyway, I absolutely love you, Simone, and have a spectacular day.
You too. Okay, give me 5 minutes. I have to change
the episode today. How what do people think?
I haven't had a chance. I was trying to outline the episode that I was going to contribute today. So I plan to get to it when I'm with the kids.
Oh, that's fantastic. No problem at all. Anything new you learned today or any new information? I told you though, the fact I learned today is immediately upon the withdrawal of the Israeli forces, the IDF, Hamas starts executing civilians in the street, just lining them up, shooting them in the back. I love it when people are like, oh, the people of Gaza, are being unceremoniously massacred. People are like, oh no, what do we do? Buy Hamas. Oh, that's fine. They were probably gay or something. Whatever. Oh my God.
Do we know what they were?
Yes, so they said they were not like sufficiently pro Hamas during the war or whatever. Basically, anyone, and this is the reason why I personally had a lot less negative thoughts towards the casualties that were happening there than I would in a normal war, because Hamas made a pretty good showing of trying to kill anyone who wasn't pro Hamas. You know, there weren't a lot of people left who were not pro Hamas.
Well, apparently there were enough.
Yeah, but we don't even know if these people were anti-Hamas. I mean, it could have just been a terror campaign or anything like that. You know, this is the way these things work.
I think the broader theme is that Hamas was perfectly willing to almost indiscriminately kill its own, or use its own as human shields, or.
Well, no, the wider point being is that while the IDF were occupying there, you know, in many ways, it was a safer place to be than it is today, which is a shame, but that's, you know, I think what everybody expected who wasn't completely brainwashed. And it's wild to me that we're not seeing the protesters mention this. And as we mentioned in the episode today, just nobody cares. Like the war is over. And all of those college people who literally like celebrated October 7th, and they were cheering about this, and there was all of these things. They didn't cheer when the war ended, and when they said that was their goal. And I think for a lot of people, and a lot of progressive been coming out here and saying this, they're like, oh, like it really was like about murdering people. Like it really was about killing the Jews. It was not about what they told me it was about. Because they would be cheering right now. They would be holding celebrations on these college campuses. They would be in all of the cities where they march the streets holding celebratory marches, and they just aren't, because they didn't care. And I think that there's been some videos of like some leftists like, oh my God, like, so this was really about anti-Semitism. I thought that was like a right-wing grift. So this is a wake-up call for a lot of people. And for a lot of you, if you saw people who were actively pushing this stuff and whining about this stuff, and they're not actively celebrating the end of the war, I would, you know, seriously, like if you thought that they were genuine in their beliefs, like reflect on that, right? Like reflect on what that says about what their actual goals were. Anyway.
Pretty dark.
Yeah, pretty dark. But I mean, it's easy when you're fighting against evil. Like I like our side on all of this, because it just feels like the other side is so nakedly evil.
Makes things simpler.
Yep. do you guys want to get me, I can get you some bonkers.
Okay.
What about you, sweetheart? Say like and subscribe. Not quite there yet. Hey, Octavian, do you want to say it? Like and subscribe?